What's up, guys? Welcome to another MarbleCast. Today, joining us on the MarbleCast is Chris Griggs. Chris Griggs is a comedian, an actor, and an improver from New York City, and he was my improv teacher when I did improv a bunch of years back, so I was excited to have him on as a guest to talk about that experience and talk about some improv and some stand-up stuff. So we hope you enjoy this podcast. Let's check it out. Mr. Chris Griggs, how the hell are you, man? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. It's been a minute. That's the beauty of Zoom.
Yeah, man. I think the last message I had on that Facebook Messenger was, hey, do you think it's a good idea to do the same, have the same teacher for improv for the two different levels? And that was the last I talked to you in 7 years ago.
What did I say?
I think you said it was fine. If it's up to you, you were like, whatever. Whatever you want to do.
That's the prelude to who I am, people. I'm someone that teaches improv. That's how we met, right?
Yep.
And I'm a stand-up comic and actor and all that jazz living in New York City. So if you're wondering, like, who is this guy? At least you now know. So there we go.
And how long you been doing stand-up and improv?
I've been doing improvisation and acting for about 20 years, a bit. Although I started late, kind of, in my estimation, because I didn't start when I was a teenager and all of that. I worked in advertising for a minute before I got into it. But I've done stand-up for about 16 years. So I moved to New York, and I was really into all the early Saturday Night Live casts, and most of them studied at Second City. And they had a Second City program in New York at the time when I moved, because I've lived in New York 20 years. And I started doing improvisation at Second City program and went through that. Then I went through Upright Citizens Brigade. And then I kind of wound up at the People's Improv Theater, which is, it was 2 locations before the pandemic. Actually, it was 3 locations before the pandemic, because they also had a theater in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. But they had 2 locations in New York, and now they have, one of those locations is closed down, so they have 1 location. But I've taught improv there for probably about 13 years, and then I just started teaching intro stand-up about 4 years ago. But then that was great during the pandemic because Daddy had to work, man, you know. So it was good to be able to do remote teaching and things when I couldn't audition as an actor. I couldn't do road work or get paid for that for stand-up. So I really kind of just leaned into teaching during the pandemic.
Yeah, so you got on Zoom for stand-up. Were you able to do improv through Zoom, or is that sort of get shut down?
You know, it's weird. Like, everybody's kind of been affected by all this in different ways. Like, I taught stand-up and I taught improv over Zoom, and I taught for the Pit, the People's Improv Theater, and then I picked up some side gigs because I was trying to make more money. So I started teaching storytelling, a storytelling class, a stand-up class, and an improv class for a charter school in Brooklyn. And then I got lucky and picked up an adjunct faculty gig at AMDA College and Conservatory. They have locations in New York and Los Angeles teaching improvisation under their acting department. And that's American Music Dramatic Arts, and they're sort of like the kids from Glee if they were in college, you know, like they all just want to be on Broadway and all that. They teach stage combat and dancing. You're gonna be on Broadway, so it's very like specific, the curriculum, and I've enjoyed that, and it's also just been a lifesaver. But performing wise, to that question too, I've done a lot of Zoom shows for stand-up. And I've also surprisingly been paid to do Zoom shows. I was a little bit surprised that was actually going to be a thing. But I had people that were, hey, would you come do an hour or 45 minutes, and then we're going to connect all our family and friends on this call, and then you can perform for us. And so people might, they would just sit around and have steak, and they made a dinner. It was very kind of cool and life-affirming, and I dug it. I mean, I don't love doing Zoom shows, but I don't loathe it like some stand-ups do. I found it kept me connected to my material, because if I were just off for a year and a half and I never had to do my set or my act, 1, I would just have lost a lot of connection with my act. But 2, I wouldn't have written new material. So Zoom shows would make me write new material, you know? And I dug that. Now improv, even though I taught improv, I only performed improv a couple of times because I found it kind of bummed me out. I wasn't as into doing improv. I did some shows I have a group called the Baldwins, and before the pandemic, we were sort of the residency weekend team for the Pit for 10 years or so, and we did some shows like once a month, and I loved being connected with them, and I loved doing jokes based on being able to see their face. It was almost like doing a television set or something, where not a television set, but like if you're on set as an actor, it was almost like getting to do that, where sometimes you can see people.
You get a different feel for the person in the room.
You get a different feel for the person.
Yeah.
So I liked that with improv, but I found myself kind of getting more, it kind of bummed me out to do it as a regular thing. So I didn't do a lot of improv shows on Zoom, because I think improv is something that's, I don't want to say it's difficult, like long form improv, which is what I kind of teach. I think it's fun if it's live. Like most of the things that you really love about live form improv are things that happen in the moment. It's like live theater.
Yeah,
whereas
spontaneous.
That's why there's not a lot of TV shows for improv, because you're missing something. You know, there's like, yeah, and Joe was a cat, and like he was the mayor of Cat Town. And
well, did you see on Netflix with Thomas Middletich and John Ralphio from Parks and Rec? They did a whole.
Schwartz. You know what?
Yeah.
That's one. I don't know. I'll be interested to hear your take. That was one of the few times where I thought that, yeah, this works. Like, I don't generally find myself thinking that improv plays on television, but I watched the whole season. I think they only did three or four episodes in a live theater, and I thought it worked well.
Yeah.
I thought it worked out pretty well.
I think it was a slow start. Like, if you didn't understand what the hell they were doing, like I think majority of people's improv experience is whose line is it anyway? So short form is that.
Sure.
And they took it out for long form, which kind of throws everybody off a little bit. So it's sort of a slow start. But once you kind of get into it, it was pretty good. It seemed like it worked.
It's also, and this is, there is a certain, like, you're right. I mean, so predominantly people understand, like, whose line is it anyway, which, I appreciate. Like, I've done short form. Like, I was on a Kelsey Grammer produced a short form TV show called World Cup Comedy that had a band, and we did a lot of short form things that was on television for a minute. And I appreciate short form, but if I'm doing short form, it's about be funny as fast as you can, and it's almost sort of, to some degree, they're pimping you out. You're a sheriff at a Western, but you speak Shakespearean, and it's always something like that, So I think that's different. With long form, the degree of difficulty people don't understand. So when you don't understand that this is two guys in a live theater that are making up theatrical moments as opposed to what would normally be written, I think you can appreciate things that you don't, like, we're so conditioned to not want to give up the laugh because we know that everything's written. Even with stand-up, even though, like, with stand-up, we're creating the illusion of spontaneous conversation. It's not all spontaneous. That a lot of this has been written and done 100 times. So we definitely kind of kick back and judge what we're watching and stuff. But with, I think if more people understood that this is not just trying to do a joke, but actually trying to create narratives and bring back structure in a fun way, you enjoy it more. And I think people get that on a live stage viewing of long form, but with television, we're so ADD anyway with television, because I don't even have to watch the film. I can cut 10 seconds forward, 15 seconds forward, get to the good thing, get to the good thing, get to the good thing. I don't know about you, but like, especially, I don't know, I might be watching, it's nothing for me to be like, I have something that I'm definitely going to watch from start to finish. But there's other films that I sort of want to watch, but I sometimes might only watch them like 10, 15 minutes at a time, and then I'll come back to it. I just wanted to, like, there's some films that I want to say that I watched or I want to see, but I don't have the attention. It's not good enough to keep me there to watch it for 2 hours.
Do you think that's something that sort of happened as technology and streaming services sort of like came about this way? Because it's always there. Like, you can always just go back to it. It's 100% because the technology started it. Because as soon as you open up the idea
that I can either binge a show that I like, or you open up an idea that I can fast forward 15 seconds if I'm not into it. Because, and we've all watched enough films that if you see the pacing of it is a slow burn show where people don't talk, and you see somebody get in a car, you'll just cut to where the car gets to where the car is going to get to, as opposed to just watching this. And all that stuff with the music. So it's definitely technology, but the pandemic, I think, probably even pushed it forward. Because I generally, for a while, I tried to hold on to the idea to try to watch things the way they were intended. And the pandemic just blew that out of the water, because I was just watching so much TV, so many films. I was going back and watching movies that, I felt like as an actor, why haven't you watched that film, Chris? So, like, why have you not watched The Graduate all the way through? Like, I went back, I'm embarrassed to even say this, but, like, I went back and watched Dog Day Afternoon from start to finish, because I've always just kind of piecemealed pieces of it.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, I went back and watched. I'm in the middle right now of, it's another one of those. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I never watched it, but, and I'm blanking on it. What is the movie with, it's Marlon Brando and Stella?
Oh, I know what it is too. Now I can't even think about it.
Isn't that crazy? But I'm about.
I feel like there's a train or a trolley.
I'm A Streetcar Named Desire.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I'm glad it hit me, because that would have been embarrassing. But yeah, I'm about 40 minutes into it, and it's fantastic, and you start to really, like, it's wild, because people, like, take Elizabeth Taylor, I kind of knew Elizabeth Taylor, but for me, I kind of caught her at a certain part of her work, but to go back and see, oh, that's why, that's why you're such a big deal. Watching some of her original films, it's cool, so I dig that. And I've been going back and watching all of some of Steve McQueen's early stuff, Jeff Bridges' early stuff. So people that I really like as actors, I've been trying to go back and trying to catch them in that superstar moment, It's been fun.
So studying, a lot of studying.
Lots of studying, and, there's just a certain minimalist aspect to a lot of the actors, especially then, that you don't always have, because we're sort of in a moment in time, for better or for worse, where things are very much like fast and furious and theatrical and big, and there's something just to kind of holding your ground with some of the stars where they just kind of were. If you look at people, I definitely am a big Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, people like that. Yeah. Just even Kevin Costner, I feel like there's a minimalist thing. Clint Eastwood, I feel like, Clint Eastwood has such a great minimalist way of approaching work. It's sort of like he just strips away anything that's not 100% necessary in the product. And even as a director, people just don't really direct like Steve McQueen that much anymore. Not Steve McQueen, sorry, it was Clint Eastwood. They don't really direct like Clint Eastwood anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't know. I've never been on set with him or many other directors.
But I mean, just to watch it, if you watch his films that he's directed, like, say, $1 Million Baby, it's a minimalist thing going on. He doesn't do a lot. It's not like a lot of action. It's not a frenetic pacing to it.
Yeah.
So as an actor, he's got a demeanor, but then even as a director, he sort of just less is more, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the way that he kind of approaches things.
It's funny you bring up all the pandemic stuff and how, everybody went into this like, oh, I'm going to start working out every day. I'm going to have all this time. I'm going to do all these things. And then what ended up happening was nothing, because there's so many things to do. And then you realize you're stuck in your house and you just don't want to play anymore. So you end up watching Tiger King on repeat.
Yeah.
And learn about that guy who's a maniac.
I crashed. I did 1,000%, man, what you're talking about. So, man, when this pandemic happened, I thought this would be for a couple months, and I was like, man, you mean I can hang out in my apartment and work on things that I put off, and do that? I mean, not that it was a good thing, but I thought, man, I can relax a little bit. Maybe my body can recharge. So, man, I started working out in the apartment, and I wrote 8 chapters of an improv book that I was, I've never even started on. I was working on a short film script with a friend of mine in LA, and we kind of got through the first draft, and then me and a buddy of mine that we wrote 3 pilots a couple of years ago, thinking that one of them would be good, and so we finished the one that was actually going to be good, or the one that presented itself as good, and then I crashed, and then it just all got to be just nothing. I stopped. I haven't touched the book in 6 months. I bet I haven't touched that book or the script for the short form film in about 6 months, and the only thing I kept up, and you'll appreciate this because you work out, the only thing I kept up during the pandemic was working out in my apartment, because I thought the only thing worse than this going on is for me to knock out about another 80 pounds on my frame and then sit around. I don't want to live with that, dude. That was my line. It's like, I'm not going to sit around and just also be wheezing and crazy overweight and feel like garbage. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. So what I did was, my system that kind of worked was, and I have been doing this for a while, drinking. Like, as a stand-up comedian, you're always out and people are always offering to buy you drinks. And so I'm not good. When I drink, I tend to not want to stop after 1 or 2 drinks. So I've kind of been, for years now, I'll drink on Friday and Saturday, but I don't drink Sunday through Thursday. So I've done that for a while. But then for the pandemic, I thought I'm also going to only eat healthy Sunday through Thursday and make sure that I work out in the apartment. And then I'll just have I just got off an island Friday, Saturday in my apartment, fiesta time, with pizza and beer Fridays and Saturdays. And then I kind of had a reward to look for. So I do feel like it gave me a bit of structure and routine that sort of worked for me.
Yeah. What kind of workouts would you do? Did you just do like body weight push-ups and stuff like that? Go running?
In my apartment, I found I've got a staircase, which hang on, I don't know. I've got like this staircase. It's like it goes down.
Okay.
And so I can do dips and pull-ups off steps.
Huh.
So that's always
Check
there.
That out.
I got dips, and I got pull-ups, and then I look like I was a psycho, but I would always do 10,000 steps a day in my apartment. So I would always just walk and do 10,000 steps. I would do push-ups, and I just started building out in like increments of 50 and seeing how just going up. Because I've never been a big push-up person because they hurt. I don't like it. But it's weird. Like, I will bench, and it hurts, but I like it. But push-ups, for some reason, I don't know. But I did them for the pandemic, and I've still been doing them. And then I started doing some yoga stuff because, sitting around on your couch, old man back, can't have that. So I started doing some yoga things specifically designed for more core and lower back, just to keep me from walking around like this all the time. And then I got into handstand push-ups against my door.
Nice.
So I've always been like, I'm not a good fitness guy like you are. But one thing that I did do, because I think part of fitness to me anyway is the psychology of it. I got to figure out something that works with my brain chemistry. And one thing that I have always been able to get my hand around is that if I decided to work for a certain period of time and I worked myself up to a certain maintenance of some things, there has to be some kind of value to it. And then, like I did, you don't want to get rid of it because it's like, like you do a frequency card and after 6 you get a free hoagie. Well, I've already put 5 in. So like handstand push-ups was something I thought, if you can do that and then you could just do it without so much pain, that seems to have some kind of value. I like dips and pull-ups for the same reason. It's like if you could do X amount of sets, then, or even like pull-ups, you'd have to have something going on. So I like that. And the same thing with push-ups. I used to do, before the pandemic, I hate running, but sometimes I always thought if you could run a minute mile in a certain time and just hold on to that time, there has to be some kind of value to that. So that's always this weird relationship I've had, because I've always wanted to get in the gym and get out as fast as possible. So if you can build up certain levels to where you could get in and get out fast, which there's a certain degree of difficulty to what you're doing, like I'm benching this, I'm squatting this, I'm doing handstand push-ups against something, there is some kind of a maintenance value with that I can get my head around.
So I like how you said that, where like you needed something that made sense to you, that worked for your lifestyle. Well, one, your priority is not going to be fitness and working out, but it does help you do all of the other things that you're doing. So doing simple stuff and keeping it simple for you, that's awesome, man. For me, I couldn't sit in my house with a barbell because my ceilings were too low and I was making way too much noise. I was hitting the roof, the ceiling in my basement. So I just came to my gym every day. And after a while, we just opened up. I was like, listen, I'm here. If you guys want to come in, let's work out, because I'm tired of being in my house. I couldn't do it.
I really missed weights, though, which is weird because I wouldn't have thought that I do miss, like, the free weight aspect of my workout. I just started going back to the gym probably about 3 weeks ago, and I really missed it. And it was sad to see how much I dropped off. I don't know. I haven't at least 100 pounds on my weight, on my bench, and it's so sad. It's like, man, I used to bench this, and now, oh my gosh, because I was benching. I mean, I say 45, 90, 180. The bar's 35, so that's like 205 or something. And then I was probably benching like 3 or 4 sets of, like, I don't know, 225, which is not very much for someone like you, but for me,
that was like, great.
That was like, oh man, that's some weight. Like, people see that as weight, and then now it's just like I'm back to like, 155. I'm just inching my way back up again, trying to get 3 sets of 8 and 10 out. It's like, oh, but it feels.
I can get your numbers up, Chris. Don't worry about it.
I know.
Just let me know when you're ready.
If anybody can. But then also you got to kind of keep a certain amount of regimen for acting. Like I've been lucky because I've gotten some work. We were kind of talking about it before the podcast. Like, the work is starting to pick up again. I've been doing live stand-up shows again, which nobody cares if I'm out of shape for that. But I just finished a horror film that we shot in Vermont, and you want to look decent on camera because I'm playing a small town cop, and I don't want to be the out of shape, sloppy cop. I want to be the cop that looks like they could do something, because that's kind of the way the script's written. So it was good, So it was good to kind of. I've actually lost some weight during the pandemic overall, and now it's good to kind of get back in the gym and all that.
So when you're preparing for a show and you say you're not in shape on stand-up, like what's a progression that you use for stand-up? Like, how do you work material out? Is it like, do you have to just keep playing gigs and keep going out there and trying that out and just tighten it up? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, at least for me, where I changed my writing. I changed my writing habits for stand-up during the pandemic, because normally, I set out block times and I write, and I have, I sort of set up like each month on my laptop, and I try to write new material. And then you're always going out and working things out with audiences. And because I didn't have that, and honestly, I didn't trust the feedback that I got from Zoom on whether a joke worked or not. So I found myself thinking that, for like the pandemic, when you're I'm trapped in my apartment, it is kind of a death by paper cut, slow burn trauma, and I just wasn't feeling it, like trying to sit and make it. I didn't need to beat myself up for not writing for an hour and a half or whatever. So I started going back to when I started. I used to do color-coded index cards, and I started laying. They're still around. I started laying cards around my apartment, and then by the color coding system was how much I liked them or didn't like them, like A, B, C, that sort of thing. And then throughout the day, I could just randomly grab a card and noodle with it, and it just felt more like picking up something fun. So I found it made the writing experience for me more enjoyable than tedious, and that worked. And probably like a lot of comics, like there was a tweet that someone did that I liked, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it was some version of, I'm paraphrasing, but I can't wait for stand-up comedians to find out that 2 hours of pandemic material equates to about 3 minutes on stage after it's over. And I feel like that kind of feels true to me. I wrote so much stuff about the pandemic that I don't even want to do it on stage. Like now I don't want to do it. It worked for Zoom shows, but I'm not interested as much in doing it. There's a couple of pandemic jokes I wrote that I do think are applicable that I'm keeping, but for the most part, I'm interested now to go back and say these are the non-pandemic jokes that I wrote, and it's going to be great to get out in front of an audience and find out if it really works or not, because you never really know until you start getting in front of people and just grinding out the jokes, what sticks and what doesn't. And then you also have to find out what jokes work on the road versus what jokes work in Manhattan, versus what jokes work in Brooklyn. Like, it's not always the same thing. So, you know, I had all my old material down to, you could drop me out of a plane and I could do 5 minutes in a Starbucks and kill, because you have jokes that, this joke is an A joke that works anywhere. This joke is an A joke, but it's only going to work in Manhattan. I'm from Memphis originally, so this is a joke that's probably only going to work in the South, but it's not going to work here. So, but now it's interesting to kind of go back and be surprised again. My first couple of live stage shows that I've done, it's been fun to just be surprised about. I was so sure that this part of the joke worked, and that didn't work, but then something that I never really even thought was that funny, everyone laughs out of a chair, and you're like, oh, that's where it is. So it's been good to kind of play around with that on stage.
It's funny how, like, you do all the Zoom shows, and I imagine it's super awkward because you can't really hear the audience laugh or anybody laugh. Like, you'll get a little bit, you'll maybe see them.
It depends on the setup of the show.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 you can't, because if you've got, you know, what's funny about people with Zoom shows is that they have no problem being jerks, where people will get on a Zoom show, turn off their camera, turn off their mic, and then you're getting nothing back from them.
Yeah.
And for sometimes I'm like, why would you, I mean, I know why people do it, because whatever, but it's kind of rude to just buy a ticket to a show and then just like listen to it like background noise. I mean, I don't know, I get it, but it's also rude. So, but then there are other shows that I've done, you know, like I've done, because there were a lot of the club shows that were happening, I've done shows where there were like, you know, 60, 70 people, and you can spot, you know, you get spotlighted on Zoom, and then let's say out of 60, 70 people, even if only 40 of them have their mics on, you can hear them laugh. And you can hear them laugh, and you can sort of get some idea about things, but it's not the same. It's a little bit like running underwater, but it's better than nothing. But yeah, most of the time, if you're talking about 15 people or something, you really don't get a lot. I don't get a lot of, the only thing that I get out of it is practicing saying the jokes. Because there are definitely jokes that I'm ready to go do now, because I've done it 20 times on a Zoom show, and I've really got the rhythms down on the joke. So that's beneficial. And then I also did, which was also kind of, maybe this is part of the new world order, but I also did a couple of Zoom shows that, you know, and I don't mean to be derogatory towards Zoom shows, because they've obviously, I've found some merit in them, but I don't know that I think of them as much like real shows, you know, in the traditional sense. But I was looking at my IMDb page a couple weeks ago, and there are several Zoom shows that are on my IMDb page. So, you know, that kind of stuff you don't really know about until it happens. And, you know, they are, like I said, people were doing shows like, you know, I've done a ton of shows on Twitch TV and other kind of, they're not going to be the top of mind streaming services, but they are streaming services. So I've done a couple of shows for streaming services or people that are kind of more digital networks, and now I see that, oh, they're on my IMDb page. And that's cool, because I don't think anybody else knows. They'll just see a TV show. They don't know, you know, that it was a Zoom show a year or two from now. So, were you able to do any like private shows or anything like that? I did some private shows for people. I did shows for people that were small audiences, but they just wanted to pay for someone to come do stand-up. My favorite one was, I did a wedding where someone asked me, they were doing a live closed, kind of a closed event wedding that they were going to broadcast out. And I believe they were broadcasting it out on Twitch TV. And they asked me if I would host like all the elements of the wedding, but then do a stand-up block. And it was fun. You know, I really kind of went into it a little bit, but, you know, got paid. It was sweet. It's kind of life-affirming. People finding ways to get over adversity and celebrate. They want to get married, man. They're not going to let the pandemic. This is when we want to get married. So that was fun. And you could kind of, it was that same thing where I'm locked in. So you could get some responses from people, and you're also getting responses from people that were, some of it was on Twitch, and then some of it was at the live event, because the live event people were mic'd, because they did have an audience for that. And then, you know, I don't know if you've done anything like people, it's weird now, but they comment, and they hit like heart buttons, and I love that joke, laugh out loud. I did a dating site. Someone paid me to do a dating site where all the singles were there, and I did a set about just dating, singles, relationships, and I couldn't hear anything, but it was, they could love that joke. Oh, that's funny. That's happened to me. So that's something, especially if you're just sitting around your apartment by yourself. I mean, it's something. Yeah. You need some kind of human connection, So I did enjoy that. And again, it was like another way of making money. So I'd be interested to see if any of that's even a thing. Because on the one hand, I think live stage is more interesting. But on the flip side, like my brother lives in Memphis, and he's a huge stand-up comedian lover. And so he wouldn't think anything about, he loves Jim Norton. So if Jim Norton were doing a stand-up show on Zoom in New York, he'd watch that. Because for them, that's a different experience. To get someone that you dig remotely, that's kind of fun for them. Yeah. And I also think probably we'll also see clubs venture out into, I could do, if nobody's in my club on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I could streamcast a live stand-up show to anyone all over the world. And especially if you're in New York, there's an audience for those things. There's an audience for, if I'm just trying to get 100 people, you think out of the whole world, and you're the Comedy Cellar or Gotham Comedy Club, or like a comedy club that's in New York, and you can get some people that have done late night shows and get some people that have some credits and everything. There's a kitsch value to that. I can see that being kind of a thing. It's never going to replace the real thing, but I do think there may be opportunities for additional revenue streams. Just like in your business, I have a lot of friends of mine that I think they're going to keep doing fitness live streaming because they have an audience now. So they have an audience, people seem to like it, they do it out of their home, and they make money at it.
Yeah. I think it's a cool idea, though, to, like, even if it was like the afternoon and there's nobody in the club or like a handful of people just live streaming it, it'd actually be a good way for comics to work out material. And you kind of see that like early stages of jokes, and like maybe it's not the best set, but like you see the comics working stuff out, and that's kind of interesting too.
I would absolutely do that, and I did, during the pandemic, I did one or two, right before the restrictions got really harsh on the comedy clubs. I did a live stream show where we did a regular show, but there was no audience in the room, in the club. Right. And it was a blast. It was fun. I mean, I totally agree. Like, if that was all I did, I think it would. But if it was just part of the mix, I'm doing live shows, I'm traveling around, I'm doing things, but then it's a Tuesday at 1 o'clock and I'm not doing anything. And particularly like in New York, I'm within walking distance of 3 clubs anyway. So I could walk, and on a 2 o'clock, just kind of practice, letting people kind of see how the sausage is made and that sort of thing. If there's a market for it, which, at least for me, because I'm a comedy nerd, so if I went back before I ever started performing, I would be interested in that. Particularly if it's someone, there's a lot of people that if you're really into stand-up, there are so many comedians that people, like, the mainstream don't know who they are, but people that are really obsessive about stand-up know who they are. And there's people that are really, really great comedians that, like my parents don't know who they are, but my brother does, because, he's not around anymore, but before all this, years and years ago, one of my favorite comedians of all time, and I think probably my favorite live stage comic to watch live was Patrice O'Neal. Yeah. And I would always be geeking out on Patrice O'Neal, and people didn't always know who I was talking about. But people that knew, like people that were in the know about the art form, they knew who I was talking about, because Patrice was the best. And so I think that kind of experience, if you could bring that remotely, there's an educational value to it, and it's just also fun. It's fun to sort of, if you love something and you could watch it, and that's what's really interesting. Like, I got a buddy of mine that's obsessed with jazz, and so they're doing a jazz live streaming show from an old studio that was sort of renowned in jazz circles, and it's cool. Like, even though I'm not a huge jazz buff, I've watched it. it's fun. It's just something different, and it doesn't require that much from me. It doesn't require that I have to travel. It doesn't require this huge ticket price. It's just something where I can get access to something that I can learn about from my home, and that's fun.
Yeah. So were you able to practice with the Baldwins at all? Do just like mini shows just on your own during the whole thing, or was that something like you guys just cut to the side and just wait it out?
What's funny about the Baldwins, and like for people, I mean, most people wouldn't know who the Baldwins are. The Baldwins are like, they're an improv group that's been around in New York for probably about 12 or 13 years, and probably one of the longest running improvisation long form groups in New York for sure. And we've been performing for a while here in New York. So it's kind of one of those things. Like if you're in New York and you know long form improv, you probably know who the Baldwins are. But other than that, people might not know who they are. But this is what's interesting to me about improv, because improv is very much like a group mind dynamic. So I have to be of service to the group mind more than what I want. And I have always been a big, we got to practice, we got to rehearse, we got to practice, we got to rehearse. And I don't know, let's say and I'm guessing, let's say we've been around 12 or 13 years. I'm guessing, but somewhere around maybe it was year 6, most of the group didn't want to rehearse anymore because we were doing shows and we didn't want to practice, and they wanted it to feel fresh. Because once you've seen me do stuff 1,000 times, it loses some of the spontaneity if you're in a group with me all the time, And I was so opposed to it. And then I just kind of gave in to the idea because it was the group mind, and we got better, And so I think that's what I really took away the fact that I do, because like even when I'm teaching, I'm basically teaching from let's cast the widest net for your success. And I do think 9 out of 10 improv groups should practice and rehearse. But for our group, we were just at a level, and everyone else was an actor and performing and doing other things, so it wasn't like that's the only time they were on stage. It was more like fun. We kind of like, I haven't seen you in a week or 2 weeks, and that kind of thing. And also, because a lot of times on the weekend I was doing stand-up, so I might not make all the shows. Well, we didn't rehearse. And then during Zoom, we went from going weekly. We found that we didn't want to do a weekly show, so we were only doing a show probably once a month and doing it on Instagram Live or Facebook Live and some of that. But what we did do was have like kind of Zoom happy hours where we would all hang out, because they're still some of the funniest people I've ever been around. And so we would just sit around and, make each other laugh and goof and have a drink and all that. So I really enjoyed that. And it would have been, everybody in that group has been doing improv over 10 years at least. I would say everybody in that group has sort of either, been a professional actor for a while. We have people in the group that have had children, and though there's a lot of times, where you kind of take different paths because you become a family and have kids. But at one point in time, they really are like some of the best of the best improvisers I've ever been around. But there are also people, like one of the people in my group is on Freestyle Love Supreme, which just finished a Broadway run after right before the pandemic. I saw them, and and that's Lin-Manuel's improvised rap group. And there's a couple that are just like myself, just working actors, and so they're doing things anyway. And so at some point, I just think we found like rehearsal was more of an impediment. I kind of want to be surprised because like sometimes when I'm teaching stand-up, I'm always telling people that it's also like when I'm performing, I want to have fun too. I want to laugh. And there was a comic, I want to say it was Mike Birbiglia, but I'm not 1,000% sure. But somehow I caught something on social media that I just stuck with me, that they said on a podcast, which was that comedy is surprising yet inevitable. And so if you're kind of like an old married couple comedy group, after a while it loses some of the surprise. And we've kind of found delight in finding that surprise again. So I'm excited to get back on stage with them. I don't think any of us are in a hurry to do a weekly show, but we're definitely going to do. I've already talked to the Pit Theater about doing some show, in the next couple months. We're definitely going to do something.
Nothing scheduled yet.
Nothing scheduled yet. So we just kind of reached out, and they will book something. Because, well, I mean, like we said, like the pit location on 24th is not coming back, at least in the short term. And then the pit location on 29th Street between 6th and 7th, the pit loft, which was the original location, it has come back. But even that location for now is really leaning more into teaching and doing some showcase shows maybe on the weekend, but I don't even know that they've opened up for weekend shows yet. So, because also Simple Studios was also something run by the pit, and that's not coming back. So they're kind of just doing classes there for now. But even a lot of the stand-up clubs in New York, they're back, but there are a lot of produced shows. There's not as many booked shows as there were before the pandemic in the city. Part of that's because people are kind of leaning on produced shows, but then also part of that's because clubs went out of business.
Yeah.
You know, places went out of business. Creek in the Cave went out of business. Dangerfields, which was, you know, that's an iconic club that's been around since the 80s.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and hopefully maybe I'm sure real estate prices are going down, so, you know, there's always this fingers crossed thing of maybe they'll come back in another fashion and pick up a location. But, you know, it's hard. If you're a stand-up club and the city, I was kind of disappointed, honestly, because especially Manhattan, you're an arts mecca. So much of your tourism revenue and the fact that you exist, the fact that you matter, is because of the arts. And they didn't really do anything to help. They didn't really do anything to try to keep theater spaces more, like Broadway shuttered, but on some level, it's incredibly hard for Broadway, but you know Broadway's going to come back. You know, in some fashion. Not to say certain theaters have not been closed, because they have, but a lot, man, you know, you talk about stand-up clubs, and you're talking about small theaters that are putting on plays, and experimental theater and nonprofit theaters. They needed help because there was zero way for them. They're not like restaurants. They can't do meals on the sidewalk. There was just nothing. And there wasn't even a lot of dialogue among our government officials from Manhattan.
I don't want to say any too controversial about the New York City government over there, but I think they fucked it up, if I'm being honest.
I like the way that you're not trying to be controversial. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm velvet gloving the conversation as well, but I feel pretty strongly that they didn't do anything that I could see that helped any of the art institutions in the city. And it was kind of like, good luck.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Come back.
Well, didn't he put on an improv dance show in the middle of the street one day, I think, on Instagram.
That's going to nail it.
Yeah, that was it. Let's do that.
But there's so many funding programs, and it was really kind of surprising that they didn't do more to try to fund people that were trying to keep theater alive. And you know what? I mean, I did do these kinds of shows. I did stand up in the park. You know, that was almost in a weird way. Man, it's kind of why you love New York, why I love Manhattan, right? Because, I would walk around, people doing jazz on the sidewalk, going to the park, and people are playing. There's dance recitals going on. I see people doing Shakespeare around the city. And it was so, oh my God. And people, I kind of am somewhere near Juilliard, and they would just be doing performances through glass, so you could walk out there and watch their students and stuff perform, and it was fantastic. It was it's so much about what New York is, and that's why when people were talking about New York being dead, it's like, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard.
Well, they tried to kill it for sure.
But I think we can safely say a lot of people did everything they could to kill New York.
Yes.
However, there's sort of this one thing is that New York is just, I don't know, it's just undeniably not going to die. You can't kill it. And then the flip side of that is, I don't even think rich people would let New York completely die, because there's nothing like New York. So if you're rich and you've never, all of a sudden, if real estate prices are going down, you're going to want to buy a piece of New York, because it's not like a city that there's another city that's like it. There just isn't. There isn't anything like New York. And even if you don't like it, like I've had friends of mine come and say, oh, I don't like New York because of this. They understand that there's nothing else like it. You know, they understand that you may not get it, but you're going to get why it's a big deal. So what I'm hoping is, and I'm like you, I don't want to get super political too, but what I'm hoping is that, and it's probably not going to happen, is the answer to your problems, New York. I know you haven't had as much revenue coming in, but your answer is not to put that foot right again on poor people in the middle class and start twisting it. I mean, gym taxes have already went up in Manhattan. So as soon as I went back to my, it's sort of like, so the gyms that you didn't really do a whole lot to support anyway, it's the second that they reopen, you've already put a % tax on in Manhattan on gym fees, and already. And that's what I'm hoping is that they find ways, and they probably won't. But
I think that I was talking about this in my last podcast with Brooke, this girl Brooke Seam, and everybody's responsible for their own lives. Like the government is, I think their goal is to fuck you as hard as possible. Pardon my French, but it's up to you to.
That's all right.
It's up to you to deal with it, and it's your life. If you need to do something that helps you become creative, or you want to change your life in any way, that's on you, man. New York is gonna be New York, and whether you like it or not, they're not there for you. You're there to aid them in a sense. So whatever you can get out of your environment, and whatever you can find those moments, I guess, that are worthwhile, that's it. But other than that, you shouldn't hope that somebody else should come in and save, because that's just not going to happen. And especially government, they're going to fuck it up.
Yeah, I think sadly that's the way that it is. And that's similar. Like I grew up in a small town, I grew up on a farm in a small town, and I was raised by my uncle, and he had a third grade education. So I had to sort of do a lot of bootstrap work to kind of get anywhere with anything, and had to fund my own college and all that stuff. So I definitely am someone that, nobody else is going to, I never assume anyone's going to help.
Yeah.
And so far, that's the way life has portrayed itself.
Definitely have to be
I've always been
self-sufficient.
able to count on that. Like, I got to do my own thing, and be good at it, and have a skill set, and all those things. So I don't think it's the way it should be. Like the way that you described it, I don't think that's the way New York should be. I don't think that's the way we should be as a society, but it is the way we are.
Yes.
And so I live within that. I want to live in New York, and I never assume New York is going to help me. And New York's not. They've lived up to that promise. But there are things that New York will give you, and I sometimes will just say, like, look, New York's not going to promise you money, and it's not going to promise you success. In fact, it's probably going to do everything it can to make sure that doesn't happen to you at some level. But the thing that New York will give you is, if you're passionate about something that you want to be great at, people are doing it somewhere in this city at a ridiculous level. So if you look, like if I lived in a lot of places and I love botany, who cares? But if I live in New York, I know some super freaks are doing botany at some crazy level, and I could really elevate my game in this botany thing, and I could then figure out a way to monetize it for myself by working with the very best of the best. And that's the way I feel about stand-up. I mean, there is no money in stand-up for years of just, but if you can get great at it, then you can go make money. Because I look. Sometimes I think about Manhattan as this dojo of a lot of things, and so you're going to climb this mountain, and you're going to struggle, and you're going to bleed, and it ain't going to make you any money, but you're learning at this dojo of something that you're passionate about, and then once you can kind of get their 10,000 hours in and really get good at it, you can parlay that anywhere in the world, because New York does push people to be great. If you're into something and you want to expose yourself to that. So I do love that about the city. But yeah, I mean, we're probably all going to be paying 60% in taxes to get out of this.
Well, I think I heard, I was listening to another podcast you were on, Centralia, and you were talking about your advertising days, and you had a job and you were making good money, but it wasn't what you wanted to do, so you were unhappy. And that's what got you into stand-up and improv. So like you moved on and you got more creative and you were able to do something that you enjoyed, maybe not making as much money, but you're proud at the end of the day, right? Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, I created my best life. I basically, but yeah, it took a while. But I was someone that I was like I told you, I kind of started in advertising, but I worked on Wendy's national advertising and for a while, and I lived in Cincinnati for a minute, worked with Procter & Gamble, and right before 9/11 happened, which is kind of the shift with me, I was someone that was going to be very happy studying improvisation and doing advertising, because I was making a lot of money, and I was working at the time with the U.S. military, and I was, our client was at the Pentagon, so it was pretty cool. And then we were supposed to have a meeting at the Pentagon the day after 9/11. So I'm in New York preparing for a meeting, and then someone's like, turn on the TV in the conference room, and then 9/11's happening. And I stuck with the job for a while because, I don't know, it just seemed like, I wanted to help or whatever they were going to be doing, and I was still working with the military. And then the company got sold, and I got laid off, so I started taking a stand-up class, and all of a sudden, I was like happy before, but somehow it's almost like life helped me see like this could be your best life, because I don't have kids, I'm not married, so to live in New York and to be able to perform stand-up and improvisation and then act. I was doing plays at the time, and like I've gotten to do TV and film and things like that through the years, and to be able to do that, I really just I really almost like kicked my life forward and saw myself one day as the fun guy at the nursing home, and I wanted those stories, I wanted those memories, and I thought, I'll figure out a way to make money. Because I do think I got into advertising, even though I did like it, there was a fear base to it, where it was, kind of fear based in the way where it's a great way to make money and be kind of a reflection of art, but I never had to suffer. I just had a job out of college, so I don't know. There were some lean years in the beginning, but they all just felt like part of the gig. And in the beginning, I don't know that I even cared if I became rich off of it. I just wanted to be able to live long enough to say, I wanted to know if I could do it at a professional level, and that kind of goes back to the botany thing I was talking about. Like, New York will let you know if you can do something at a professional level. If you really keep your eyes open, and you bring in a peer group of people that you respect. So, like the things that you're involved in, you probably have, these are people that either do things the way I would like to be able to do them at that level, or people that do things kind of like what we were talking about also before the podcast. We were like, that's not very good, I could do this better than them. It will give you a lot of information where you really, or you can get a great education, and you can really learn by doing. And I do love that the city sort of provides that for people. It's a great gift that I do think the city gives you.
The competition breeds success, and there's nothing but competition in the city.
New York, I think it was funny. I was watching a podcast with Lorne Michaels. So of all the people in the world that are sort of like, Lorne Michaels has done his stuff, but Lorne Michaels, he said, nobody cares about what you've done or who you are or any of that. People just sort of like, what can you bring to the table? Like, what can you do? And that's something that it wouldn't be bad. That is one trait that wouldn't be the worst thing. I feel like if most of the cities and states in the country kind of, like, what do you bring to the table? And there are definitely places outside of New York that do have a clear thing that they're bringing to the table. Like, even with the South, and I'm not going to do the bit, but it's sort of, I have this whole bit about, look, there's cool South and there's not cool South. And like, there's great places in the South that bring a lot to the party, like New Orleans, birthplace of jazz. I mean, you're bringing something to the table. And then there's places that not so much bringing anything to the table, So that's kind of like, you should get good at something.
Yeah, I like that about improv too. It's like, what I learned there was one exercise you had us do was have a conversation and I couldn't do it. Like, I'm really bad at having a conversation, like, because some of the rules with improv is don't ask questions, and here I am, all I'm doing is asking questions, and I'm bad at that on stage, I guess. And then
it's okay on a podcast.
Yeah, I know, I'm bad with it. Don't ask questions. I don't know anything, so I'm more physical than audible, I guess. That's where I was in improv. Yeah. But what the hell was I even talking about? Now I forgot.
You were talking about how you learned how to have a conversation while you faltered at having a conversation.
Yeah, now I'm failing at having a conversation.
Improv kind of helped you learn to talk to people. And
yeah.
Also, you know, even though going back to, because I know, like, you know, like you said, you're physical, you're competitive, and all those things, improv also kind of brings in this idea that trying to find ways to say yes to people instead of judging them in the moment.
Yeah.
You find, people, and sometimes you find, that people do have a lot more than, we make so many quick judgments on people, and I think improv helps you learn how to, you know, say yes and to people that you normally might not have given a chance.
Yeah, you got to be open with it. You got to be open with everybody on this thing. And a part of that is, like, you have to know what you want out of that scene or from the other person, and that's so important. And you transfer that to life. That's kind of the point that I wanted to make, is that you have to transfer that to your job, your business. Know what you want, and you'll get something out of it, and you'll have a better result. When your reality doesn't meet your expectations, that's when the biggest heartbreak happens, and that's when everybody gets depressed, man.
And there's so much to be said for, if you know what you want, you know, it's funny, I'm a weird Gemini where there's a part of me that's very much like Taoism and Zen and like just use the force of, you know, everything's good. And then there's a flip side of me that's very Art of War and the Prince and Machiavelli and all that stuff. And I tend to try to embrace both on a certain level. But the Art of War, you know, the battle is over before it's begun. There's so many people that want something, but they're not ready for that conversation. They're not ready for that moment. They're not ready to get, you know, lucky or whatever the word is. Because, you know, luck really is opportunity and chance kind of coming together on a certain level. So, like on my refrigerator, I have a Garfield crayon thing that somebody gave me, a magnet, many years ago. And I just pulled this thing out of a book, and it just said, character is fate. And I just have that. And I like that because it's not really attached so much to money, because I do think sometimes we overthink money. And I know plenty of people that are rich that are miserable, and I know plenty of people that are not so rich and they're like, I want that life. So it really should be about trying to create character for yourself and try to create a world that you like being in, and that you still have things that you're passionate about, because especially as you get older, you want to stay engaged. And that's why, you know, you take a guy like Lewis Black, he's an older stand-up comedian, but I've only been around him a couple times, you know, in like around clubs, but I've read his book and I watch him being interviewed, sharp as a tack. Yeah. You know, it's all like clicking. And it's because, again, creating content, pursuing art, keeping reflexes going. I think that's also a powerful thing with improvisation, is it constantly allows you to keep playing like golf in your brain, of pulling out clubs and creating things on the spot, and it really kind of keeps those cognitive reflexes sharp, you know. And it lets you be a bit of an artist, which I think there's a lot of mental health value to people being able to find something that they truly enjoy doing just for the sake of doing it.
I use Lewis Black's one of his bits about when he's talking about golf, and it's like golfers are the dumbest people in the world because they wake up and they think that they're going to be great and they're just a piece of shit. And then at the end you don't get better at golf, you just suck less. So I tell all my lifters, we're not trying to be good, we're just trying to suck less than yesterday. Use that bit all the time.
Lewis is not a bad spirit animal. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom, and I'm not remembering the name of his book, but his autobiography is really good.
I'm going to have to check that one out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure having you here, man. I think we're going to wrap this one up.
That hour blew by.
Hell yeah, man. This was awesome. Quick. This was great.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate you having me.
Where can people find you? Well, if they want to do some improv, they want to do some stand-up? Plug all the way.
You know, the easiest one-stop shop to finding me is Chris Griggs, Griggs, comedy.com. That's my website. It's got all my social media on there. But chrisgriggscomedy.com. My Instagram is at Chris Griggs Comedy. My Twitter is at me, Chris Griggs. But all my Facebook, my IMDb, all my contact info is on my website. So probably the easiest thing is just go to chrisgriggscomedy.com.
Chris, it's a pleasure. Thank you again for being on. And anybody that wants to do some stand-up, and anybody else that wants to do some stand-up or some improv, hit him up, please, and thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me on there.
Awesome. And remember, guys, age is inevitable. Weakness is not. So get out there and live some shit. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching today's MarbleCast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any content. Check out our Spreadshirt shop to grab some swag. And if you would like to support the MarbleCast, please head over to anchor.fm. All of the links are in the description, and it helps us out to keep the channel running. Thanks so much, guys. See you next time.